Today I want to play with watercolor, and we're going to watercolor an image with multi-colors. So let's get started. We're going to play with the penciled pear stamp set. This is in the 24-25 annual Stampin' Up! Catalog. It is a gorgeous set, and it is great because it has one of the styles that's called sketched styles. And so all of these little lines are the artist's drawing lines. So if you love pears, like I love pears, they're wonderful, they're all over my kitchen, they are just one of my favorite things, then this set deserves a spot in your stamp room. And it's great, it's got a mix of 3 different images. So the 4 pears, which are really cute, the blossom on the pear tree, and the pear itself. And this is what we're going to use today. And then some great sayings that look a little bit like sort of your own handwriting. So we're going to use It's Your Day today. So I have my stamp. So this is a cling stamp, meaning that it has red rubber, has some foam on it, and this is great medium here for us to do the technique we're going to do. So I've pulled in a piece of our Fluid 100 watercolor paper, and you can get the measurements over on my blog. You can see that in the description below. And we're going to also use our Stampin' Write markers. And we're going to use 4 different colors, and we're going to create a little work of art with this pear. So we're going to start with our lightest color, which is our petal pink. And we're going to use the brush tip of our 2 Stampin' Write markers. I realize that's upside down, but we're going to use the brush tip. And you just take the lid off, and you just take that tip and run it right over top of the stamp. Now, we're going to do watercolor today, but if you want to see this technique again on a different stamp, and I think it's actually the 4 pears, but not watercolor, take a look at the link in the blog as well. So the pears, if we look at the picture, and if you think about a pear that's just, becoming ripe, usually it has a little bit of pink, a little bit of light yellow on it, sort of in here. I'm going for the pink peachy kind of look, and then the outside is turning that beautiful green that tells you it's ripe, and then we have the leaf. So we're going to go into that whiter area, the one that doesn't have as much stuff, with our petal pink. I'm going to give it a good covering there. Then I'm going to do a little bit of our peach pie. And I'm not really thinking too much about where I'm going to put that. I just know that I want a little more depth than just that petal pink. And then just a tiny little bit of the brighter pink. So our pretty in pink, just a tiny little bit right down at the bottom. Now this is going to look different every time you do it. So that's one of the joys of the technique that we're doing. I'm going to take wild wheat, which is an unusual color. It is a color that is sort of green, sort of gold. And so if you think about a pear, it is definitely the perfect color for a pear. So I'm going to go around the rest of the pear here, make sure I fill in all of those gaps. I'm also going to put it down at the bottom, but we are going to put another color at the bottom as well. So I'm just using the side of my brush. I'm going to go in and do everything here, the leaf as well as the stem on the pear. I'm not pressing really hard, but I'm making sure that I'm always using the side of my marker. And then I'm going to go in with some Mossy Meadow, and I'm just going to think about where do I want the darkness on this leaf. I'm going to put some down at the bottom, and I'm just sort of going to tip it, just the little tip, just very lightly though, along where I think, and this is art, so it's up to you where you put it, but I'm also going to put some right down at the bottom here. So this is a shadow. Again, let me bring in that piece. So this is the shadow down here. So I want that to be just a little bit darker. So I'm just going to tap that in there and then tap along the bottom, really where that whole thing is, where that whole little shadow is, I guess. And you can see I'm just tapping, making little tiny marks. I could just color this, but I do want a little bit of that wild wheat still to show. And let's just put a tiny little taps here. So you can play with this. You can play with any stamp that you have that has markings like this. These type of sort of artsy ones really, really do work well. and just sort of play and see what you get, because every time it's going to be different. So now what we want to do is we want to pull in our Stampin' Spritzer, and this one just has water in it, and take the lid off. And what I do is I always have a little arrow pointing to where the spout is so that I don't spray myself in the face, because I have sprayed myself in the face before. So we're going to hold this away from you and you're going to spray. You want 6 to 8 inches between the Stampin' Spritzer and the stamp itself. You don't want to spray really close, because what that's going to do is it's going to take the ink and sort of disperse it. So we just want to put a light mist, well, a little more than a light mist actually, on top of here. So I'm going to spray it 4 or 5 times, but I'm going to sort of move my hand, or you can do it one of 2 ways. You can move the stamp or you can move the sprayer. And I found it's easier if I move the spritzer. Okay, so here we go. So you can see that, actually I did more, didn't I? So that's probably enough. And what we're going to do is pull in our watercolor paper. So it is fairly wet. I'm going to show you just how wet that is. So hopefully you can see that in the light. Don't let it dry too much, and then put that right on top of your watercolor paper. Press it down, give it time for that ink and that water to sort of mix together, and then we're going to lift up. Okay, and what you're left with is a piece that's going to have lots of watercolor effects on it. So I'm going to put that off to the side and we're going to let it dry. Now, if you stamped and you thought, oh, there's not enough water, you can give it another spritz. So I'm going to give it just to show you that it will still move, but you want to be careful here, because if you put too much on, you could risk having your pear just completely go. So while it's still, and because it's watercolor paper, it will, even if this dries and you put a spritz of water on it, it will still bleed a little bit. So I just want a little bit, okay, just a bit, to get those moving. And you can see it's moving here. So some of this is going to be really watery. So that maybe was even a bit too much. So you can see how that is moving the ink, especially that Mossy Meadow. So now, if you don't like that, there's 2 sides to every piece of paper. And this is really thick it's like really thick cardstock, but it's really thick watercolor paper. And so if you think, oh, I went a little bit too far, you know what? Turn it over and use the other side. Okay, so I'm going to do this again. So I wanted to show you just how quickly that could move, and you have a piece that you're not quite as happy with. So let me do it again. We're going to fast forward through it so that you can just see the technique. And I am going to use the stamp that I already have. You could probably stamp this again, but it's going to be very light. So I'm just going to clean this off right now. And I'm going to do that again. So watch this in fast forward. So there you go. You can see that that is a different looking one than what we had even over here, because I placed some of the color a little bit differently. There was probably a little bit more water on this one than there was on the first one. Not so much water in the middle again, but I'm okay with that. So we're going to let this dry, and we're going to work on the rest of the card. I'll bring in the other colors. This really doesn't take too long to dry. It really depends how much water you put on. So let's just set that aside. So we're going to be working with a piece of Mossy Meadow. And so I often get asked the question of, when I score my line, which way do I fold it? So when you score into your card, so you're actually indenting the card, what you're doing is you're separating the fibers and making them deeper. You're moving them apart from each other and giving it room so that you can fold it this way. So if that is indented, you want to fold into that indent and then just crisp up your edge. We're going to go ahead and we're not going to glue this one down, but I'm going to tear a little bit off the bottom. but I want to go ahead and do that here first. You can see that that's getting drier. So I'm going to stamp on it first. So we can stamp our words. So I've pulled in It's Your Day, and I have the Mossy Meadow. Now I could use the Stampin' Write marker if I wanted. I'm going to use the stamp pad, and I want to place this on the grid so that I can see that I'm going to be straight, hopefully. Put that right down. Now this is a little bit bumpy paper, so you want to make sure that you put it down and take it off, but leave it there to actually set up. So there's our words. Now we're going to tear. So when I tear, I hold it in my dominant hand, so I'm right-handed, and then tear the paper towards me. This is a little bit tough paper, so just know that it might take a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing up top. Do not try and get this to match. You don't want it to match. You just want them to be torn at the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to do just another little technique with my markers. So with that brush tip, I am just going to give a little bit of color along that torn edge. So just a little bit of my peach pie, and then I'll go in with my wild wheat as well, and just sort of pull that in. So I've got a few little bits here. So all you're doing is you're sort of roughing it up a little bit. So if this doesn't appeal to you, by all means, leave it out. You don't need to do that step. We're going to do one more step while I have it here. I'm going to pull in, well, I don't need paper underneath here because I'll clean afterwards. That's one of the really great things about our glass mat. So I can make a mess on this mat and then clean it up. So I'm going to take that brush and I'm gently going to put it into my cap, and then I'm going to flick it out. Don't be too hard here because you can ruin these tips fairly easily. So just go ahead and flick it. I'm about 1.5 inches away, and you just want to give some of the darker colors. If you wanted to do 2 colors here, you could, but it just adds sort of a old world kind of look to your piece. Okay, so we are done with that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to glue that down onto our piece of wild wheat. And again, you can get all the measurements on my blog here. So here's the one that we're not using. So you do want to use a fairly hefty adhesive here. So I'm using liquid glue. It will give me 2 things. It'll allow me to move it around if I happen to not get it where I want it. And it will really adhere well to this stronger piece of watercolor paper. So place that down. Now it's still going to be a little bit damp here. So if you're doing this at home, maybe just let that dry just a tad bit longer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear the bottom of this. And again, I'm not trying to match it up. You might just inadvertently do that, but I'm really not trying to match that up. Okay, so we've got that. That now is going to go onto a piece of peach pie, and we are going to add a little sort of artsy touch to the side of this. So this is going to go pretty much in the middle, and it's not going to be exactly the same all the way around. So just know that. That's just an added design element on that. So now let's pull in some of our In Color jute trim. I have to say, I've not used this all that much, but I did think that it would really set off this particular piece well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to tie this around the left side, and I want a little bit left when I tie it. So I'm going to, this piece here, and I've got the measurement in your on the blog post, but what have we got here? We have, let me do a quick measurement here down at the bottom, which you might not be able to see. So that's about 21 inches that I have. So you are going to, from the back, put it on around the back, around the side. We're going to tie it in the top left, and we're just going to knot it. Okay, so you don't want to tie it too tight, but you do not want this loose either. So I tie, put my finger there, and then tie it again. Okay, so then you've got those pieces there. Now, we can just leave them like this, or I'm going to show you the alternative that I did. So if we leave them like this, what I would do is tuck them in behind so that they're not really in the way of the pear. And you might love that how this looks, right? You might love how that sort of curls around in there and gives you a neat look there. I actually want to bring that up just a little bit. I think that this is not high enough for me. I want it to be a little higher if I can. If I can't, I'm not going to worry about it. I don't want to take the edge out. No, we're going to leave it. It's happy the way it is. Okay, and then I'm going to put that on top of my mossy meadow. And again, I'm going to use some liquid glue there. And you really do want to use liquid glue here or something strong again, because we have to get this glue down with that twine on there. So come right up to the twine. You can go right over the twine if you wanted to with a few little dots, but get lots of glue on there to glue it down, because this is going to be fairly heavy. And then get that onto your card base. And it's really going to set off all the different colors that we have going on here. We're going to finish it off with the Neutrals adhesive backed sequins. So we are going to go for the gold for this one, which I thought was a good color. And you can decide where you want to put this. I want to put it, I want to put it on the wild wheat if I can. Maybe should have gone for a small one, but we're going to go for these two. I'm only doing two because it's actually matched out pretty well by the one pear and the two sequins. So there you go. That is your card. Let me show you the alternative and what I did to the alternative. So the only thing that's different on this one is the amount of water, probably, and how I colored. But what I did with the ends is I unraveled the ends of the twine. And then they're a little bit more wispier, maybe a little bit more artsy. So you may like that look. So there's two slightly different ideas there to show you how you can create with your Stampin' Write markers to create a watercolor look. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much. If you did, please subscribe and like this video. And while you're at it, head on over to my blog at designwithjo.ca and get yourself signed up for my email. I send weekly emails with lots of tips and tricks, contests, freebies, first announcements for things, all kinds of great stuff. So I'd love to have you as part of our community. Thanks very much and have a great paper crafting day. Bye-bye.